but can you trust it? And should you trust it blindly? And I think, pretty obviously the answer is no. So there's two classes of schedule errors that I want to talk about that we address here. One is missing scope. So if you have a project or a schedule with, thousands of activities, very difficult on bigger and more complicated projects because, like I said, there can be thousands of tasks, and I don't know what's. It's very hard to look at a schedule and just say, "Hey, here's the missing piece of scope." Right. The other thing is violating requirements. They're on any kind of non-trivial project, on any sort of non-trivial schedule that you build, you're going to have a bunch of complex requirements. Things that we call them like execution strategy. So to give you a few examples that we always like to give, you're doing maintenance on a highway, for example, you're not allowed to close, like often the government will tell you, you're not allowed to close 2 consecutive highway exits, right? So that's a complicated project requirement. And how do we encode that in the system, right? The primitives that we normally use in scheduling, like durations and lengths and things, they don't allow you to encode that. You can't use Primavera to say, I can't close 2 consecutive highway exits. So often what it is it just ends up being in somebody's head, basically, or maybe in like an Excel file, like a traffic chart or what have you, right? Another example is, we're not allowed to update this, or we're not allowed to replace this boiler during the winter months, for example, because we need like continuous heating or something like that. That one actually you can kind of do with P6 if you know enough about P6, but it's still not ideal. So those are the 2 big classes that I want to talk about today. So like I already kind of talked about, these are hard to catch, right? Scope gaps are very difficult to catch, and they very often, they require like some really serious review to make sure we get through all of them. For anything that's not trivial, requirement violations, obviously, they're usually like sitting in people's heads, and or like in an Excel file somewhere in some drive, right? So we don't want that. We want it to actually be encoded in the project management tool that we use. Peer reviews and checklists catch some things, miss others, right? Now, obviously, like one thing to be clear though about that point is that even with like guardrails, something more sophisticated like that, you're still gonna have to do reviews, obviously, but it can catch most of those issues for you afterward. So we already kind of talked about guardrails. Basically, what are they? They're an automated validation system that work automatically for you as you work on your product. So during the baseline execution, or during the baseline, during execution, during like any phase of the project. So even way later, if you have like a change order or something, and something completely changes in your project, you want those guardrails to enforce the requirements that you put in place, right? So, and of course, we always say this: we don't replace human judgment. You still need to, you still need somebody at the wheel, right? But it can augment that human judgment by flagging things for you early, etc. So, scope completion execution strategy. I'm going to gloss over that because we already talked about it. So to dig a little bit more into scope completion, the way it works, and this is just one of the systems that we have in place. Like different companies use different like ways, they deploy guardrails in different ways. But at a very basic level, you can have a deliverables list that basically represents all of your scope. So this is the entire project scope, and as long as you agree on that and you kind of review it and approve it, we make sure that your schedule includes all of that scope. So even if it's like thousands of items, we make sure all of those are in there, and we also make sure that they're in there in the proper way. So you could put in guardrails that say, well, this one has to happen between this gate and this gate, right? If you're using gates, this one has to happen, in these months, etc. So you can enforce all of those rules. And then here's a very high level, quickly, since I don't have a ton of time, we can talk about how the scope completion works. Basically, you have documents. So this thing can understand documents. You can have like thousands of pages of PDFs. They don't have to be designed for a computer to read. They can be made for humans, and it can go through and analyze those, extract the deliverables for you. Okay, you review, right? You can augment, like some folks who use our tool. They say literally like some of the scope literally is in an email, right? So like my boss sent me an email, and that augments some of the scope. You can pull that into our system, OWL, and that will actually expand the deliverables list for you. And so once you get that deliverables list, that's the sort of authoritative source of truth for your scope. That's what represents your scope. And from there, the guardrail engine makes sure that your schedule aligns with that. So if there are any gaps in your scope, the guardrail engine will find those and propose fixes for you. And oftentimes, if you have like a bunch of data already in your system, it can just go ahead and fix it for you, no problem. But, if there's still open questions about things, it can either propose fixes or create what we call what if scenarios. I'm sure you guys have built those. And you can do analysis and everything on those what if scenarios to understand the impact of those before you merge them into the main schedule. And that applies both to the scope and also to the execution strategy. So let's very quickly look at a demo. I want to show you this is a very, I'm going to try to make it quick, but this is a project that we're building from scratch inside of our tool. Now, I just also want to mention that a question that comes up all the time, you do not have to build from scratch in our tool. You can do your normal thing in P6 and then pull it into OWL, but you can also build from scratch. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm going to skip ahead. I'm just giving the agent this document. And actually, while it's building, I can show you the exact document that I gave here. This is just an example. It's like a public, this is just a public thing. It's like a scope of work for some very small industrial project out of New Jersey. Okay. And then it goes into the details here. This is the actual PDF I just handed the tool. This is the some details about the project schedule. And then once you get into here, we get into, these are basically the deliverables, right? So it's like it lists deliverables, and we're going to go ahead and extract all of those and build a schedule out. So just for the sake of time, because it'll give me half an hour, just going to go back to the video. So you can see on the right here, the agent is working, and what it's going to do is it's going to build out a schedule.